The warmth of the wood still can't be imitated, not even in your house. A parquet floor still gives a rich look to your room. The parquet floor we're about to install is a click parquet that will be installed as a floating floor. You'll see, everyone can do it. Evidently, before you start installing, you need to know how much parquet you'll need. Therefore, you have to measure the space and calculate the number of square meters you have to install. When you order your parquet, it's best to order 5% extra. Doing so, you'll compensate for the cut loss, and whenever you have to replace a plank, you'll have one on surplus. If you, like in this case, install your parquet floor on new screed, then it has to be dry enough. If this isn't the case, molds can grow under the parquet floor. In order to check the dryness, you can use a moisture meter. With this test, a sample from the screed is taken. The sample is then mixed in a bottle with calcium carbide gas and several metal bullets to break the pod. The calcium carbide gas then reacts with the moisture and indicates the moisture content. Is it low enough? Then you can install the parquet. Also make sure that before, during and after the installation, the space has a humidity between 45 and 65%. The room temperature has to be between 18 and 21 degrees. Remove all irregularities from the subfloor. Stains from plastering and painting may cause a thickening. You can remove these with a putty knife. Then sweep the entire room once more, which allows you to remove all the big pieces of filth. Afterwards, use a vacuum cleaner to remove all the small dust particles. Before you start, check the evenness of the screed. In case of new screed, this should be even, but it never hurts to check again. You can also use a long flat bar to check. Can you put a folding rule underneath? Then you should level. Order your parquet well beforehand and don't immediately start installing. Bring it indoors into the heated space and let it acclimatize to the temperature and the humidity in the space in its closed package for a week. Before you start installing the parquet, you always have to install a subfloor first. Here we start with subfloor planks. These are thick planks. You can use them to even the subfloor even more, but here they're used to reduce the reverberation in the space and for extra isolation. We're working in an old house with high ceilings, which can cause much reverberation, and the screed has been installed directly on the concrete. There is no isolation in between. In order to avoid cold feet when walking on the parquet, we install these subfloor planks. Use a wild bond pattern and clean them afterwards. We'll install our parquet as a floating floor. This means we won't be gluing them. In case of a parquet installed as a floating floor, we always use a subfloor. This subfloor also serves as a moisture barrier. Moreover, this subfloor serves as an insulator for impact sound in the room. You just unwind the rolls of subfloor. You cut it to size with a simple box cutter. Put the strips next to each other. This subfloor is overlapped on the grey strip. There's a double-sided tape which makes it easier to stick them together. By gluing together the subfloor, you also create an insulator. This insulator is important when the ground floor has no basement underneath. Moisture can reach the parquet, which can make it swell. When you stop moisture, you also avoid the growth of molds under the parquet. After you've finished the subfloor, you can then determine the installation direction of your parquet. You can decide on the installation direction of the parquet. If you install them in width, it gives your room a wider look. If you install them lengthwise, then your room looks longer. We have chosen to install them lengthwise, which follows the light. Have you chosen the direction? Then you should calculate if you can start with the whole plank. Draw a plan and divide the width of the room by the width of the plank. If you are left with a small piece at the end, you shouldn't start with the whole plank. Are there any fixed elements in the room? Calculate how it measures up. In our case, we have to cut out a piece from the plank. We start installing the parquet in the left corner. and always create an expansion joint of at least 1 centimeter all around. We use spacers for the expansion joint. The expansion joint serves as a barrier for the expansion of the floor. If afterwards the floor still moves, it won't get constricted. You can only connect the first row at the top end. Gently tap the top end seam with a rubber mallet to connect. Then click the long side of the second row into the previous row. Use a hammer and a tapping block to tap the seam in order to shut it entirely. Now you can see the purpose of the spacers. They keep the first row aligned. Once you've figured out the click system, the installation will continue smoothly. Use a tapping block to tap the long seam. Connect the short seam by tapping with a rubber mallet. Use a rubber mallet with a light-colored head. A black head is more prone to leave marks on the floor. At the end of the row, you have to cut a piece to size. You can simply cut the parquet. The remainder piece, you can start the next row with it. Now we've started, we can continue to install the parquet. In order to do so, we'll open the packs and mingle some of them, which ensures a beautiful variation. Parquet is a nature product, and color schemes can occur. When you mingle them, you won't end up with areas in the same color, and you can hardly notice the differences. You don't need much to install parquet as a floating floor. It's fairly simple to install, and if you connect the click system the right way, you will have a beautiful end result without any problem. Once you've installed several rows, you should sit on the parquet. It's much easier to click them, and because of your own weight, the part already installed will not move much. If the remainder of the last row exceeds 30 centimeters, you can use it to start the next row. Check whether the seams also have a minimum distance of about 30 centimeters from the previous. By using the remainder piece of the last row, you also limit the loss. Moreover, you get a wild bond pattern. The top end seams jump around on the floor. Avoid using a stretcher bond pattern. Then the seams are continually at the same distance. You can resolve this by using another piece than the remainder piece. You will also find some shorter pieces in the packs. If you notice you're using a stretcher bond pattern, you can insert a shorter piece and continue. Also, if you notice you'll end with a small piece, you can insert a shorter plank. It does not only make your floor more beautiful, by avoiding short pieces, you make the floor more rigid. Naturally, you can also use the shorter piece to start with and break the stretcher bond, or to fill in at the end, resulting in less loss. You can install this floor on both sides, which is convenient if you have to fill an indentation. You should best use the click system in a correct manner. When you have to work against a wall, it's difficult to use a tapping block to close the seam. Using a mounting iron, you will succeed. It will close the seam perfectly. The plank against the wall has to be cut to size. You can do it easily using a plunging saw, but if you don't have one, then you can use a circular saw, a hand saw, or even a fret saw. In width, you can also use all these types, but the easiest to use is the crosscut saw, if you have one at your disposal, of course. The last plank is also easy to install with a mounting iron. The top layer of our parquet is made of massive oak, which can be sanded later on, to renovate or to give another look to the parquet. The click system makes it easy for everyone to install. The click system ensures a firm connection between two planks, which makes it hard to move them apart. At the top end as well, this connection is firm when they've been tapped together. It's also easy to remove cutouts from a plank. Indicate where. The easiest way is by using a fret saw. First, you have to saw from the side to the corners. In a curve, you can saw to the back. Then you have to cut out the last corner in the curve. When done correctly, the plank should fit perfectly. By the time you have installed the last plank, you'll be an expert. You have to use a mounting iron to install the last planks against the wall. Our parquet is already protected by oil from the factory, which makes it possible to walk on immediately after installation. The oil also ensures stains and small scratches are easy to repair. Evidently, it's always better to be safe than sorry, so make sure you attach felt pads under your furniture and chairs to avoid scratches. As for maintenance, cleaning once a week with a special soap will do, and we give the parquet a treatment once a year. Before we finish, we have to make the transition to the other room, and in order to install this properly, we put the seam of the two boards right in the middle. We measure the width of the opening and divide it by 2. Then you can put the planks in place. And in order to make the transition even with the space, we mark the end of the wall with a long flat bar. You can also cut the planks to size in width. You should use a circular saw or a plunging saw. This will saw straight. A fret saw doesn't do the job as well. When the planks have been cut, you can put them in place. Our floor has been entirely installed now. Now is the time to cut the subfloor. We will tile the rest of the space later on, and meanwhile we finish it with a transition profile. You can already cut the subfloor to size. Using a simple box cutter, you can cut it even with the edge of the parquet. The parquet has been installed, but the room has still to be finished. We install skirting boards to hide the transition between the wall and the floor. First, you remove the spacers. You have to install more than one skirting board along the length of a wall. Best is to attach them in mitre, in case the skirting board should expand or shrink, which is a possibility as it's wood. Then the joint is less visible, and the skirting boards can pass behind each other. It's also easier to retouch them. First, indicate where the skirting boards have to cross. Then saw a skirting board in mitre. Put it in place where it should be, and then measure the other skirting board. Make sure you indicate the corner correctly and then saw the other skirting board in mitre. Have you done well? Then the skirting boards should fit precisely. Have all your skirting boards been sawed? Then you can glue them. Fix them against the wall using some polymer glue. Polymer adheres to different types of walls and skirting boards. Skirting boards are not only used to finish floors and walls, and therefore also the space, they hide the expansion joint you must leave. In order to fix the skirting boards while the glue dries, you can put in nails with the nail gun. They will no longer shift when installing the rest of the skirting boards. On top, you still have to finish the skirting boards. Seal the transition between the wall and the skirting boards with an acrylic gap sealant. In order to finish the kit, you can use scraper rubbers. These come in different shapes and sizes to finish your joint in the width and form you desire. Apply the kit first. Try to do this as neatly as possible. Then you pass your scraper rubber, which results in a perfect joint. If necessary, you can go over it several times with the scraper rubber until the joint has been properly filled. We close the inside corners in the same way. These have not been sawed in mitre. This is not necessary with a modern skirting board. By applying the kit on the inside, the transition between two skirting boards is no longer visible. A floor, and certainly a parquet floor, is one of the last things to install in a space. Then you can't damage it and it finishes a room.